Enter this place, and time acquires the sound of blood passing, of breath present in the lung, neither taken in nor letted, hovering, held and released in spiral. The world becomes wider, nearer. The forest walks in, anticipate. The birds are spinning, every avenue for life fills itself. I am not alone. In this whole wide grove, beneath this suspended sky, over this rising earth, with my body solid, I meet my gods. Fire, thunder, steel, cold hard wind, silver sea, eye given, thought whetted, hand taken, antler armed, fair of foot, dead by what harms none. Ring showing, apple bearing, silent weaver of worlds. Clothed in richest nakedness, drunk on a still expectant wind, I listen to the lady under God's gaze. In every chamber, air and fire meet, explode, aware of more. Every thread of sinew, finger's print of weave, strand of body hair, streams, a perennial clutch and spurt. Blood-filled veins in a spongy membrane stand rigid, pebble stretch-headed, waiting for the rain. Such an ordinary lord, but a lord the same. She bids him remember. Afternoon, hello, welcome. This is me doing my poetry show on a Saturday afternoon with a bunch of poems, mainly drawn out of modern heathenry, Old Norse verse and such. That poem was called Stow, which is an Old English word for place, as we bestow things, but more specifically, it has the meaning of a holy place. Now I'm going to do a few poems, and I've also got a few poems by a friend I'd like to read. They don't know yet, it'll be a surprise. But the first I want to read is fairly fitting to the times that we're in. I see many friends posting on the social medias about how they're giving something up for Lent, the Christian festival, of course. Possibly don't know the origin of the word. Lent being a shortening of lengthen, which is an Old English word for lengthening, and of course refers to the lengthening of days, which joyously we can see happening around us. It wasn't so long ago we were stuck in the midst of deep midwinter, and though it is still cold and there's still little food around, there is more hopeful, and Eastertide will be with us soon. And of course that's kind of the origin for the desire to give something up for Lent, because it is the time when food is scarcest, so to turn it into a religious festival makes sense. But my particular thing for it today and involves this shield, which you can see behind me. I've brought out to put. It's a shield that was given me by my friend Thorska Thorn. She made it herself and dropped it on my lap one Yuletide, quite to my surprise. I said, "Hey, it's for you." And as you can see, it's got 4 illustrations, and they all come from Norse Smith. And I'll take you through them just now. So here we have Thor in a boat. He's been hunting the world serpent, this giant snake that circles the world. And when he manages to hook it with his fishing, pulls it up, and throws his hammer to try and destroy it, this great monstrous beastie. In the original stories, we're told the worm gets away, but in Thorskegger's version, she's actually had the hammer smash him in the head. Below we have the goddess Freya. In the winning of Risingamon, the story goes that she slept a night with each of 4 dwarves, 4 goldsmiths, who each made the necklace for her. Here we have Thor's wife Sif and Loki, mischievous trickster god, cutting away at her golden braids, which is the precursor to a tale in which Loki and Thor, between them, managed to win great treasures. Well, actually Loki on his own, pretty much. 4 great treasures for the gods, including Thor's hammer. And at the top is a version of a story again by Skegger, in which the god Frey fights and destroys the giant Belly. She adds a little episode in her retelling in which Frey brings the ghosts of all the people the giant has killed back to their place of rest. Now, she gave me that. At the same time, I was reading a poem, an Old Norse poem called Houselong, which is a poem based upon such a shield and is part of a genre of a shield, in which the poet is talking about the shield that he has been given. And I wanted to emulate that, and I tried to make a copy, a poem based on the same form as his about this shield. It seems that it was a genre in Viking times. His poem was called Houselong, harvest long, since he says that's how long it took him to write it, through the season of harvest. Mine took me the season of the lengthening days, and so I called mine Lengthen Long. And it goes like this. In Hordaland, the harvest long, as hay was gathered in the wain, Theodulfa honed his thanks to Thorleifr. He raised that lord a bridge of words. Bragi, bright Valhalla's skald, bestow your mead on Math to make his verse no worse. For has Thorskegger Thorn, like Thorleifr battle-board, given as gift, a shield with gold and stories told of deed-famous Deesir, and daring wayfarers, striven have I for staves to stand as worthy thanks. Early comes the harvest home to the hall of Thor. Falling sheafs of shimmering strands shears in the hands of Fenrir's father Snick and Snack, as the Snotra of Bilskinir gloats. Troubles need bring treasures, trade for a crop of braids. Lofty reapers, lacking the lady's store of foresight, thinks he to thoroughly vex the thunderer's sense of fun. But his health shall stand as hostage for hair, with gold repaired, and boons for the gods and bounty, else bones unknit and groans. Down into the dark Alves, Donna to flee, has gone the loose-tongued long one, laughing at dwarven craft, a gadfly galling their pride. Guild may yet a shield provide, till forge and fire flare for hammer and hair. The saga of Thrudheim speaks, summons the gods to come and weigh the worth of treasures won by Farbauti's son. Loki's wagered head is lost, his lips are tightly stitched, for the mighty hammer Mjolnir, and a mane of golden grain. See I too a goddess gain, glad in necklace, reckless ploy to pledge her troth, plights her body one night to each of 4 earthworms. Arms are gleaming, her charms shall buy Brisingamen in beds of stunted rents. Broad in their needs and bruising, unbridled in a rutting wild, dark Alves delve the Vanadis. She draws from each a glory never known in dwarf home, till Nordris kin begin a long and loving galder to lay on tears of Freya. This Dis shall dazzle the eye, desire in all arising. Her heart shall harden armies, her hall shall guest the fallen. Her hand shall proffer healing, hail from battle and bale. Her steps shall foster flowers, fields rich harvest yield. Out upon the ocean's rim, Earth's son is also one to walk this wheel of Hild. In western seas he tests his fishing line, his feet firm braced against a worm, his hook baited with bull, the boast given his host Hymnir, hard rock dweller, to hurt the world girdler. Churns the bloody channel, the child of Loki, wildly seeking the seaway's depths, sore in tooth and maw. The hard-biting hook and line is hauled by Swanroad's trawler. Timbers of the boat are burst, breach by thunder's feet. Hymir's heart is in his pants, hews the rope in two. World-worm flounders in the flood, flies Mjolnir between the eyes of sore-headed serpent, splits that thought-house to bits. Hymir is food for fishes falling to Aegir's hall at Atli's urging. Now the heirs of Heimdall fare over leagues with lifting steeds to lands beyond Jormungand, have even moored in the meres of Mundulfari's son. Last on this lid to tell, a lord, the boast of Njord, brought by golden bristles, Brock and Eitri put flight into jogging hogs' hooves. Heart-sore Ingi Frey sings a mournful galder to guide the ghosts of a giant's spite. With Dane's wand as weapon, Waingod has the Jotun slain. His flesh now feeds the earth the farmers he worked to harm. Cattle and grain are given gear to keep them the year. But none may numb the grieving, naught can mend the slaughter. Such scenes have been painted, on circle finely worked. Thorskegger Thorn has made it, Thunder's Dis a wonder. These staves must stand as thanks, strophes of worthship and troth, praising the girl and her gods for goodly leather and wood. If you know Thorskegger, you may not have heard from her in quite a while, but she is well and writing. And we hope to be doing some things together soon. Some shorter ones now. There's some ways in which I take the Norse mythology to touch on areas of our everyday lives. And this one, it touches on self-care, self-nurture. It was inspired at the time of the midwinter Yuletide. The sun, so low and so weary. It's a poem called Heart and Sun. I've never had to do as much as she has done. Quiet in the sun-lacking days, I've taken over nurturing, shone upon myself. Kindness like sun rays. A candle lit across a longest night. She so low in the sky brings a tear to my eye. I can see her rousing now, arms stretched, going higher into heaven over earth. Do I hear a horse's snicker, rattle of reins? Snow will help her too, brightness of ice. And though we go without through the lengthen long, self-nurture, kindness through the thin months, seeds upon the bird table. I'll do some of what she's done. Hail to you, sun. She's getting brighter and brighter. This one is very much about mental health, brain overworking. Odin has two ravens named Thought and Memory. They often fly across the worlds and come back to tell him what they've seen. And it's said that whilst they're flying, he lies in a stupor. Famously, he said, I fear they won't return. I fear that thought won't return, but most of all, I fear that memory won't return. This poem is called Hugin, who is the raven of thought, and is a meditation on what happens when thought is left on its own. This bird is heavy, hungry, and its bill is sharp. It feels worse alone, like a shower of feathers, each with an edge to pick bones with. The thorn mouth has been lodged in the dead meat that's not dead yet, since before the battle began, waiting for his brother to remember. Odin fell from his chair, sighing to the wind. I fear that thought will not return, will leave me blank in all fetters, but more. Left hanging, Odin pierced himself with the raven spear. Because thought is a hungry bird. Wha shall we gang and dine the day, oh, wha shall we gang, Gangleri? And eats what its wing cannot cover, and what it cannot eat it rips. Lacking remembrance, it cannot be told, brother, you have dined already. Thought can be an enemy to ourselves, can't it? Another short one, which talks of the goddess Freya. This may be a very personal view, I don't know. It's something I've struggled to express, that sense of how we have no choice really but to look upon things that are, things that have been, things that are at the moment. Because we can't see what is to come, we can't see which isn't here yet. I might know that I've got years of my life, how many, but all those years that are mine to live that I have not lived yet, the realness of them is hard to come to grips with. The same with everything that has not yet been created. I write a poem virtually every day. The poem I'm going to read tomorrow, later on, something that is not here yet, and that was not here before. When I think of this poem, once upon a time it did not exist. That void, that well, is something I fear, we all fear, and that we are not comfortable with in the living with it. And sometimes it steers us into depression and anxiety. So I looked to Freya, and in this poem, which I thank her for, it's called Freya Blesses. The only thing she offers is all there is, no more. But she points, fine bone in the finger, through the air, to where the cloud coalesces into thread. And she walks on feet that withstand the fire and thorn to the well's edge. Here she offers emptiness. Hush, she says. Listen, remember. Such as this we have never known. What has appeared in my mouth, in my thought, in my hand, is never known before. I shall call it today that was tomorrow. Heed it well. Now, I've been doing these poetry readings fairly regular, and when I can, I've been sharing some poems written by friends, poems in print have been published, often to their surprise, perhaps to their consternation, I don't know. And I want to do the same today. I want to read a couple of poems by a friend. So I was going through this book, The Pagan Federation Anthology of Pagan Poetry, edited by Dan Coulthouse. Now, Dan might possibly be watching at some point, so greetings to you. But I'm not going to read Dan's poems today. I'm going to surprise her, because I mentioned about Lengthen Long, about it's the time of the lengthening days. This is also the month that in Old English calendar was called Hrethamonath, with Bede saying that this is dedicated to the goddess Hretha, about whom we know nothing more. It's just that one line in his writings. Nothing more but our own personal experience of encountering her. And my friend has encountered her and has written about her. This is my friend Alexa Dewar, who is mainly a writer of fiction and novels. She writes a series of werewolf stories. But she's here in print in the Pagan Federation. There's her name, Alexa Dewar. And so I'm going to read a poem or two of hers. She might even be watching, in which case, Alexa, not too much of a shock for you. And this is her poem, For Hretha, titled Hretha. The seasons turn. I see white flowers, those harbingers of longer hours of daylight, and without delay the days stretch forth to pave her way. On clear nights she spans the skies, the constellations are her eyes. Her cloak deep indigo within, without the barn owl's feathered skin. She wards cold winter from her hearth, she guards her kin through death and dearth. She gathers round her kinder tight, and keeps them through that long, hard night. They ride with her in giddy dance, with winter nights wild hunts advance. They tread her step who hear her song, for those who hear to her belong. And now the hours of day and night come closer, lengthening, even light heralds her change. For soon she sheds her winter clothes for summer's threads, and on that glorious even day her winter guise she casts away, and then in blaze of glory bright cries victory over winter's night. Then summer comes, with hawthorn flower, and every hedgerow is a bower for sweeter pleasure. And then our days are spent in far more joyful ways. And then she winds about her head the rosebuds, Takes she to her bed her lover's laughter in her eyes, her songs of joy 'neath English skies. Hretha by Alexa Dürr. I want to read a second one of hers. And this one takes us away from Norse mythology and Old English customs and takes us to a Celtic tradition from Arthurian legend. Merlin, the magician, very famous, besotted by a young lady named Vivian, spends his time teaching her his magic. And Alexa has written a poem about this called Merlin and Vivian. On either side the river lie long fields of barley and of rye, that clove the wold and meet the sky, and through the field the run roads by to Camelot so grand. And up and down the people stride, and knights with hawks and squires ride, but I have put all that aside to be in green Broceliande. Willows whiten, aspens quiver, little breezes dusk and shiver. Here the fountain runs forever. Here I am not wise nor clever, as in Camelot so grand. Here the oaks and here the holly, here the summer cloudbursts volley, turn my learning into folly here in green Broceliande. Deep in the forest glades they say that since I came here to stay, a fine voice sings whose tone is fey, and glimpses seen of crimson gay as in Camelot so grand. But who hath seen this fairy maid? And why should any be afraid of something armed with fine brocade here in my dear Broceliande? And so I slept beneath the oak until a sound half heard sleep broke, and still adrift with dreams awoke to be undone in one swift stroke far from Camelot so grand. She stood before me, emerald clad, and in her demeanour 'twas so glad it would have melted Galahad were he in deep Broceliande. I had no hint of prophecy, no murmur of what was to be. My gift entirely fled from me. All that remained was ecstasy, far from Camelot so grand. And so in folly I embraced my doom, which reached to me in case, for I would never leave this place, this deep green wood Broceliande. And in the days that passed like hours, I gave her spells, I gave her flowers, but her fear grew. That our two powers differed so greatly, love would sour us, and I'd want Camelot so grand. As each week passes like a day, I'd show her every magic way, her apprehension to allay in our blessed Broceliande. I built a keep beneath the lake, with towers four, all for her sake, and there the fairy troop partake of tournaments that ripples make, all like Camelot so grand. And still those eyes of depthless blue retain my senses in their hue, and I have taught her all I knew within the wood Broceliande. And when at last she'd all my art, so her false fears might now depart, instead she used my bewitched heart to hold me in this cold rampart so far from Camelot so grand. And when the moonlight trails its wake, I see the world upon the lake, as men make war and kingdoms shake, far from the wood Broceliande. But here imprisoned fast am I, and here I stay until I die, or else she rue this ill-made tie. For only she can send me high to go to Camelot so grand. Until that day I am here bound, and only in the lake may sound events elsewhere, the whole world round beyond the wood Broceliande. And so shall Arthur be brought low, and so shall Mordred strike the blow, and all those brave knights overthrow, and Arthur to his rest must go away from Camelot so grand. And here I stay for evermore, unless at last e'en she may thaw. Then I shall seek some further shore, away, away from deep Broceliande. Merlin and Vivian by Alexa Dewar. I have one more from her in a moment, but first. A while ago I wrote a poem about Merlin. Very different, but I'd like to share it as it's part of. It's called Wizard. Wild-haired Merlin, standing at a bus stop. Which way to the pigs, mate? Hanging on a bare branch, spitting like a feather, coughing up an acorn, eh? Nails like a willow, weeping, teeth like a cairn, knows his way around a road, though. Riding on a boar's tusk, takes the time to trumpet, takes the babe from the mother, doesn't know him. Raven on the castle shows him the key, back of the offie, ain't it? Once and future king, drinking on the boat lake. There's many a battle before the last. Mad-haired Merlin tried to get the lady, tried to teach her what he knew, didn't he? Now Alexa, as I said, is mainly a writer of fiction, and she has an extensive series of werewolf tales. And so I offered this one, a poem of mine called The Warden of Wolves. The Warden of Wolves stands by the gate, calls me to the woods. Her hair is seen in the sunlight falling, rays through the canopy. Thinner than the trees, she sways like a flame, soft pad on the undergrowth. This is like walking where there is no ground I ever knew. The path there is, passes through my heart, so I know which way to go. I crouch where the leaves gather low, hang from my spine, teeth tasting air, hand on my neck now. Scruff in her open fist, riding a howl, the Warden of Wolves has me come to the gate, called to the woods. And to follow that, last from Alexa, it's actually something we wrote together, which I feel very proud of. She used it in one of her books for a werewolf's funeral, and it's called Epitaph for a Werewolf. My hunt is done now. Dare not call me man, nor dress me in fine silk, but in dire fur. Shoe me not in hide, but sharpened claw. Straighten not my limbs, but stain my teeth with blood. House me in no casket, but howl it to the blast. Give me not to earth or flood, but to the flame. For I am wolf, I tooth grinder, I deep-winded, I far chaser, I pack biter, I the bringer down of prey. Howl, chain-breaking son of trickster sire, howl, the dashing pair that stars devour, howl, the greedy ones at Grimnir's side, howl, the snake-reined steeds that troll-wives ride, howl, my pack and thane and thing, howl, my kin and hearth and king, howl, the track and trail and kill, howl, the flesh and food and fill, howl, the grey and howl the good, howl the shift and bite and blood, howl the grim and howl the fell, howl me through to halls of hell. I'll post details of Alexa's books and the comments at the end. But the book itself that I was reading from is The Pagan Federation Anthology of Pagan Poetry Volume 1, edited by Dan Cortas, who has promised us volumes more. And I may well be reading for other people from that in shows to come. To return us to Norse mythology, I have 4 more pieces to offer you. And I choose this one and offer it to Alexa as thanks. The god Loki, the trickster god, the mischievous, the shifter, wore out the poetry, that wore out the patience of the gods, and he was bound. He was, who knows, bound to a rock with the guts of his sons, the entrails of his sons to bind him. And above his head is a serpent dripping poison. And he is protected from that poison by his wife, who holds a bowl between to catch it, but every now and then she needs to empty the bowl, fling it away, and the venom drips straight onto his face, and that is said to be the cause of earthquakes. At the end it's said that Loki will free himself and will lead the dead in a great invasion against the gods in a ship named Nailfar, made from the nail trimmings of dead men. So this short poem is called Earthquake. I have always believed in extremity. Now I must tear the guts of my son if I would be free. As my child's child spits into my face, and my wife burns her hands, one day she will know her proper place, but for now she should find a bigger bowl. And I always believed incongruently the awkward truth that fault lines have a right to live, and schism is a useful mode of transport. Hammer it out how you might, ha, ha. But I have always believed, and now I will bring the dead to you to reclaim their nails. This is another version, another treatment of the same story. And it's a piece of fiction rather than poetry, although a friend has described it as poetry even so. The twilight of the gods, the Ragnarok, is presaged by the death of Balder. Frigg, his mother, gains the promise of all things to do Balder no harm. But cunning Loki tricks the blind god Hoder into killing Balder with an arrow of mistletoe, the only thing not to swear. Frigg's revenge is terrible. Loki is bound in the entrails of his children, with a venom-dripping serpent set over his head. Earth tremors are his writhings. The twilight of the gods, the Ragnarok, will follow on Loki's release. This is called Yes, Twilight. The earth is quaking as we get there. Splintered giant bone shivering like a spear hit threatens lowering dead Etin to fall, to drag giant skull from dwarven hands. There is a steam splash of venom flung aside onto rock, cry of steps upon the dust, then the screaming and the shaking stops. He lies quiet again. On the boulders we bound him to, with the entrails of his children still calling, Father, Father. His wife is kneeling, blister-fingered, armed with agony, the bowl still smoking, held now above his head as shield. Above his head, too, the spitting serpent, drip, 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 smoking venom's caught. His face smoking, too. My husband takes his place, sits himself by Loki's head, grim blue against the blue stone, takes a breath that includes spittle snake, mountain musk, settling dust, and blood brother. My husband runes. I tie my own gaze to Loki's wife. Sigyn does not speak, but allows me to take the bowl of glowing acid, kneels again, singing to remake her husband's face. As smoke clears, head hung between their gelder, an eye emerges from the seething skin. Our spouses' songs enter the holes each side of Loki's skull, echoes in his thought, his eye gains its target. With a gurgle and his own spit of heated water, Loki tries to speak. It is like when his mouth was stitched, but not so comical. He is hushed by wife and brother, learns to listen again. My husband runes. I can hear the thrum of Loki's children in the guts binding him. I helped rip them myself. They sound starkly alive in the dead silence of my own son, in the dead emptiness of my own son in that moment. When my son hollowed out, when Balder was a fresh weight again in my arms, when he fell but did not rise. That moment the littlest plant slivered into him, stopped his heart. That moment thrown by a blind brother, guided by this one's spite, despite in spite of. The venom growing heavy in my arms now. My son and son's wife lying on the burning ship, clasping a gold-dripping ring, fire on the twilight sky, Sleipnir leaping the walls, the firewalls of hell, Sleipnir leaping again, walking the worlds again, collecting tears from all that had kept their promises, finding mistletoe already weeping. Only this one, Loki, dry-eyed, fire-eyed, and worse, dressed as a woman. Fire venom growing earth heavy now, grief heavy. My husband runes. Earth is still, with my arms protecting, still the face of my child's killer. Sun and moon are still too, day and night are still too. The wagons have not rolled since he died, no, I got their promises at twilight. along with all the things within the world, not to hurt my son. Night promised not to fall, day promised to stay bright, sun promised not to burn, moon not to wane, only mistletoe too young. It was as if we all held our breath. Sun and moon, day and night, holding still, and the wolves still coming. But if you had heard him, if you had heard him crying in his nightmare, the fracture of his most naked fear, crying for his mother no longer there, always slender-willed, my son, his golden light bear to sing or scream. Still the wolves are closing in. My husband ruined to me a tale in our bed, his hand unwelcome on my breast, but I took it anyway. The tale-bearing witch she had loved is dead, her voice unwelcome in her own head. Would I know more or what? Yes. A tale of burning, yes, thunder poisoned by the snake's breath, splitting its skull with his fall, the listener and this one drowned in each other's arms, my husband lying dead in a bile of wolf's gut. Yes. But a tale of returning too. Life and lust for life, emerging from the scorched tree, Magni, Maudi, Thrud, hammer in their hands, fields growing of themselves, son's daughter rousing her young horses to ride a new day, my son gathering up the scattered playing pieces in the grass, yes. My husband runes, year and the tree, yes. The blistered skull spits, yes. His wife, yes. My husband lifts his spear. The snake leaves its place, coils down the shaft, my husband's arm. I tip the venom away. Together Loki's wife and I, weavers both, unbind her children. Last drop of bitterness. Outside it is dusk. Still, sun and moon, day and night are holding still, keeping promises. We wave them back unto their roads. The wolves are close. Loki and Sigyn go swiftly, Odin and I remain together in the twilight. Because the tale goes that with Ragnarok done, Balder and his brother will return from the halls of hell. 2 more short ones to finish. Now, how are you doing out there? I hope you're good. Thank you for listening for all of that. I can't actually see any messages you might send or tell who's watching, but I hope you are. Please send a comment, say hello if you want. Glad to hear from you. Odin famously hosts all the fallen warriors in his hall of Valhalla, although not all of them, as Freya gets to choose half to bring to her own. And besides, there are many more places for the dead to reside in Norse mythology. So with that in mind, I have for this one the choosers. Odin stopped me with his spear at the door. Only one, he said. Only one thought, only one memory. The rest you leave here. Birds hopping bright and black, bleak, amongst the heap the fallen warriors have left behind. We fell, and a name carried on their back. Only one thought, only one memory. I turned and stared to she, in golden feathers, taloned gaze, Freya, gathering the dun. Cats upon her shoulders, at her feet red with fur, she smiles. Only one feeling. The rest you leave behind. Leading me gladly through fields of wheat. And this to finish. I've been reading poetry every other day here on the Facebook, so if you fancy hearing more, a couple of days' time. Not always pagan or heathen in feel, but maybe you'll still enjoy it, and I will do other pagan and heathen sets in the future. The video for this remains on the timeline, so you can watch back if you want to. And as I say, I'll put the set list in the comments and also details of Alexa's books. So list to finish. Again, dedicated to the goddess Freya. It is certainly one of the dearest and closest to me. And this speaks of her flying in her cloak of feathers, which gives her falcon's form across the 9 worlds, as she so often does. Falca fiathria, I believe, is Icelandic for falcon feathers. When the bird settles, whipped as it was by crosswinds and vectors, tired wings, letting the cloak fall away, it is as if she has alighted on her own heart. Falcon Freya weeps, tears from her fierceness, amber and gold knows their necessity. Lifts once more to fly, strength of mind revived, knows the world will take her weight, as will the sky.